The display of HP Omen 16 delivers good pictures with a good contrast and a very low black value. Unfortunately, the factory settings are not quite optimal, so that a slight yellowish tint can be observed. After calibration, color deviations should no longer be visible to the naked eye. Since the display is not intended for professional users, it offers adequate color reproduction with almost 100% coverage of the sRGB color space. With 300 CD per meter square, the Omen 16 should only be used outdoors. In an emergency. Gaming in particular is not very appealing because the colors are much less visible, but text and simple graphics remain legible even in direct sunlight. The matte display surface makes its contribution here. In contrast, the brightness is more than sufficient indoors, especially since the very low black value of 0.22 CD per meter square ensures a high contrast. The IPS panel is stable at the usual viewing angles. Color changes cannot be detected even at acute angles. However, the brightness decreases noticeably from about 70 to 80 degrees, although this is hardly a practical viewing angle. With the AMD Ryzen 7 5800H and the AMD Radeon RX 6600M in our HP Omen 16, there is sufficient power for current gamers. 16GB of RAM should almost always suffice and can be easily expanded later. However, the limits of the notebook are tested when the system is made to run at 165 FPS on the QHD display. 60 FPS on the other hand seems to be almost effortlessly achievable in many games. To stretch these limits as far as possible, we selected the performance option in the Omen Gaming Hub, which increases the power supply to the processor by almost 20%. The AMD Ryzen 7 5800H has almost unlimited power consumption. For fractions of a second, it can consume 160 watt. For longer periods of time, 134 watt is standard. Both values are, for example, significantly higher than the settings found in the MSI Alpha 15 with an identical CPU. However, a larger performance leap could not be determined. At least the normally inexpensive CPU can compete with an Intel Core i7 11800 or i7 12800H. Albeit at the expense of efficiency, the effects of the increased power consumption are not really visible in our benchmarks. The Omen 16 is mostly in the midfield in the various ratings, closely surrounded by the competition. All that can be said is that the processor gives everything that it is capable of. What is really striking is the lack of a drop in the values in the Cinebench loop, which usually prevents the system from overheating. The HP Omen 16 simply ramps up its ventilation to maximum, which then counteracts any drops in performance. Similarly to its predecessor, system performance is convincing in view of the direct competition. Taking into account possible fluctuations in the measurements, the Omen 16 is roughly on par with its competitors, is always near to the top. The creation and editing of images and videos even scores above average. Models with the NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060 can't quite keep here. Only 3 skipped frames when playing video in 4K is a decent result. The measured latencies, on the other hand, show that the tuning of the drivers does not seem to be optimal. With just under 2 ms, the HP Omen 16 takes the lead in the ranking, which is unfortunately the worst result, but it should be kept in mind that the other comparable gaming notebooks are also unconvincing in this category. The installed NVMe SSD Samsung PM981A, like in any other notebooks, was able to fully demonstrate its capacities. Almost all recorded values are above average, which also explains why in our table of hard drives and SSDs, the SSD is found high at the top of our table. The SSD would be even faster via PCIe 4.0, but this is not supported by the AMD processor. The connection on the motherboard itself would even be capable of this, but this feature does not play a significant role in the performance of this system. The AMD Radeon RX 6600M is one of the entry-level cards and is roughly on par with NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3060. The AMD card offers larger video memory, so it should be able to handle more demanding titles somewhat better. Unlike the processor, however, the Omen 16 does not supply the GPU with additional power, but only with a maximum of 115 watt. In some gaming laptops such as such as the Shaka XMG Apex 15. The card is supplied with a maximum of 130 watt by Nvidia. In battery mode, HP has even limited power consumption to just 25 watt. Without a permanent power supply, gaming is only possible to a limited extent. Regarding the choice of possible games, there are hardly any restrictions. Current titles achieve more than respectable frame rates even with QHD resolution. This is especially true of games that have been specially programmed for a wide audience and generally require less system performance. The graphics performance here should be sufficient for a while for AAA games, ranging from sports simulation to battle royale games. In full HD, even if the highest level of detail is selected, a 3-digit frame rate is almost always achievable to supply the 165 Hz of the display with content. Similarly to the Cinebench loop, the Omen is not intimidated by the strong heating of its hardware over long periods. Instead of throttling and thus causing fluctuations, ventilation is increased to the point that excess heat can be adequately removed. Silence is a rarity when the HP Omen 16 runs on battery power and the performance mode is set to the balanced. The fan only kicks in from time to time. There is virtually no noise when using office programs or surfing. However, as soon as the connection to the power supply is established, a permanent background noise sets in. The reason for this is the more than double power consumption is the processor. A powerful ventilation system ensures comparatively pleasant surface temperature. We measured just over 40 degrees centigrade on the case, which never caused any discomfort. The Omen is not thrown out of sync by continuous operation. The powerful fans, which reach almost 6000 RPM, can dissipate enough heat at any time. The maximum power consumption is not restricted at any time. Hardware temperatures remain at comparatively tolerable levels. Even without any load, the power consumption of the Omen 16 is in the upper range at 12 watt, but only 0.8 watt more is consumed during video playback, which explains the surprisingly good battery life for a gaming notebook. Particularly remarkable is the average power consumption for gaming and other demanding tasks. Once the 230 watt power adapter is connected, 190 watt exceeds the values we measured in HP's Omen 16 B0085NG or Schnacker's XMG Apex 15 by almost 100%. Maximum performance is offered at the expense of audible ventilation and poor efficiency. Despite the rather low battery capacity of 70 Wh, the runtime during video playback is particularly convincing. HP's Omen 16 with a larger battery is at a disadvantage here. The reason is the much more efficient integrated graphics of the AMD processor. Although it offers poorer performance values than its Intel counterpart, it requires considerably less power for simple tasks. If performance is the only concern, then there is nothing to criticize about the combination of the Ryzen 7 and AMD's RX 6600M. Current games can be played at high or maximum detail levels. Even the QHD resolution does not overstrain the hardware of the HP Omen 16 C0077NG. Thanks to generous cooling and an unbridled power supply, the Omen has excellent performance values for just under 1300 euros, approximately $1400. The hardware is solid at best and can be pushed to its limit to get the most out of it, but this comes at the cost of high noise levels and excessive power consumption. In addition, HP has cut back in other areas for the attractive pricing. Instead of an RGB keyboard, only 4 zones with a limited variety are used. The fact that all USB-A ports are only capable of 5 gigabit per second is not keeping up with the time. Solid gaming performance, good battery life, and a QHD display for well under 1500 euros, that's $1,600, make the Omen a recommendation. However, good headphones are a must. With a view to the future and the increasing demand for graphics performance, the version with a full HD panel may be the more sustainable choice. The more powerful RTX 3070 performs a little better with the higher QHD resolution, but our test unit shows that the RX 6600M can also handle this screen. The HP Omen 16 C0077NG reviewed here can currently be found at Cyberport for 1300 euros, that's approximately $1400. The variant with a full HD display, the HP Omen 16 C0075NG, is slightly cheaper. The HP Omen 16 C0085NG with the somewhat more powerful NVIDIA GeForce RTX 3070 is currently priced at 1800 euros, that's $1900. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, feel free to share with your friends and subscribe us to get regular videos.